Hello, everyone. Good evening or good morning. Thank you very much for listening, whether you're listening to this live or later. I'd like to introduce my new course on Goethe's Faust today, which, if you've been following me here, I've been offering now online courses for 5 years. And I'm very glad that I can teach Goethe's Faust now, which is in some sense easier than teaching philosophy or reading philosophy, and in some sense also of course more difficult because there are so many cross references here. But it's this is really a course, if you have absolutely no philosophical background, then this is even perhaps better than a normal philosophical course. So but still we're going to reference Hegel, of course, and when necessary, even Kant and others. So, um, and we want to find out who Faust really is and um, what his what the Faustian soul is. So Spengler will also be mentioned quite often, and we also want to find out whether Faust, who sees himself as post-Christian, is actually whether the play itself is a post-Christian play or not. I've studied now, to my regret, philosophy, law, medicine, and what is worse, theology from end to end with diligence. Yet here I am, a wretched fool, and still no wiser than before. Hier stehe ich nun nicht armer Tom, bin das klug als wie zuvor. Those are the first 5 verses from part 1 of the tragedy at night, when Faust is almost about to kill himself. And he encounters the Erdgeist, the earth spirit, which may or may not be a reference to the Kabbalah. We can discuss that at the course. So let me just point out some of the technical details first. If you have any questions on the course on Goethe's Faust, just let me know. Well, of course, what we'll also do is I will try and bring into my lectures different, how Goethe thought of what reason is, for example, how he understood the Enlightenment when he is a bit more mature. He has a quite similar understanding to reason as Hegel had. That reason is concerned with what is in becoming, what is moving, and not with what has already petrified or is sclerotic. That's what the understanding, der Verstand, addresses. So I opened early enrollment last week, and we have 20 people enrolled in the seminars thus far. So let me just show you. If you go over to this website, which is here, that's the link to enroll is in the description of this video. And if, as I said, if you have any questions, let me know. It takes you here, and you scroll down, you find all seminar dates. We begin in 10 days from now, 1.5 weeks, on Sunday, April the 13th, and we're going to meet 9 times in total. We're meeting from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. UK time. So that's 7:30 if you're in Europe and Central Europe, that is, and 1:30 Eastern Standard Time for 2 hours. Some of the lectures will be pre-recorded and others will be live, depending on the week and maybe also the length of the lectures, etc. And as I said, if you have any questions, just put them in the chat and I'll respond to them either as I go or at the end. So If you don't have time for the seminars, then the self-study tier is for you. If you do have time, then this is for you. Oh yeah, I should mention, you can use the promo code WAGER to make a bargain with me. Hello, Nicholas. Thank you for signing up. I look forward to having you. So the coupon code is WAGER, and that takes off a couple of quid. £50 of this one here. The Philosophical Fellowship, as we call it. Or, well, if you do so desire to be my apprentice and have private tutorials with the Magus, that would be me, then please choose the highest tier and get initiated into the dark arts. There are also payment plans, etc., etc. So, what will we focus on? If you hi to Natu, I saw that you've signed up. That's great. Hi, Chance. Hi, Georgius. So, we begin next week on Sunday, and we are going to go through the text in a, I think, reasonably slow but not too slow manner. So the first lecture and seminar, we are going to focus on the 3 portals that lead into not just Faust Part 1, but the entirety of Faust. For this one here, we're just focusing on the first part of the tragedy on Faust 1. But so next year, the plan is to have a second course on Faust Part 2. Faust Part 2 is more difficult, will probably require a longer course to some extent, because you're not really dealing with a tragic play anymore in any way with the second Faust. It's basically mostly metaphors and allegories who begin to appear, and it's even more philosophical than the first one. But the first one still is extremely rich. Even just the and of course, there's no second Faust without the first. Faust first has to destroy innocence. Gretchen, that is, who is completely content in her finite freedom. Now, the question, Faust himself is post-Christian, so it's not really the pact or the wager. It's not really so much about whether he sins. He doesn't. He wouldn't even believe in that anyways. But it's more about whether what he becomes as he begins to liberate himself. You hear the kind of language? Whether what he becomes is just a debased hedonist, a sensualist, ein Lustmensch, a man who lives for lust and pleasure and desire only, or whether he can actually raise himself or enhance his life to a higher state of being. Thanks to the spirit of negation. Now, that's an idealist reading of Faust, but I think it's justified. So this is also why we're going to look at the section Die Lust und die Notwendigkeit, pleasure and necessity, in Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit, where Hegel, without acknowledging it, actually quotes from Goethe's Faust. So we are going to read other philosophers from the time as well. And if you've been to our Spengler course, which Sebastian Ostrich taught, I think about 2 years ago now, then of course this is ideal for you as well, because you now know how Spengler understands the Faustian soul, but he takes almost all of his inspiration, of course, from Goethe's Faust. to say the obvious. Hello, Harris. Good to see you here. Let me know if you have any questions. So the three portals that lead us into the text, or the entirety of the tragedy, and I would suggest, as I will do also in the course, that it is a tragedy, or maybe even the tragedy of modernity. Trying to make sense of a world that's rapidly changing, not just in terms of the industrialization, etc., but also, of course, the breakdown of the Ancien Regime and what the Enlightenment brings, and of course, also again, what liberation of desire might mean and how that can be actually mitigated and controlled, because Goethe does see that, well, that it is quite tempting to lose yourself entirely. So you could succumb to lethal temptation and desire, and desire is a necessary life force, but you could almost entirely destroy yourself, or destroy yourself entirely with it. So Goethe will try to make sense of the modern freedom, um, so that there can still be a home also. And of course, I should mention that many of you will have read different things and will pick up on references. So this is really what the discussions will be great for. And we will also, of course, consult the Bible. We must, I think. So the book of Job is an obvious candidate. Faust himself retranslates Revelations. In the beginning was the deed, in the Chen Logos. So Logos becomes deed. We will try and understand what that means as well. So the three portals in the beginning are the dedication, which is only a page, but is a rather profound moment, because here we find not only Goethe making biographical references to people who had read his Faust again and again, who had died, but I think what the poet is telling us, more than Goethe himself, is that he's trying to is that what the Faust really is a gathering of spirits from memory, whether that memory is from a cultural collective memory, or also memory of the future, and trying to attune himself to these, as he says, the schwankende Gestalten, elusive shapes or elusive gestalts. I'll also make reference to how Goethe understands what a Gestalt is, what a Gestalt is. So if you're interested in Gestalt therapy or in Jung, then Goethe, of course, is also crucial. So you could almost say, I don't like the term so much because it gets thrown around too much, but there is something archetypical here in play also. And the second portal into Faust is the prelude on the theater, between a theater director or manager, a poet, and a comic person. Of course, they are analogous to God, Faust and Mephistopheles. We'll also try and find out who Mephistopheles is. He's not Satan himself. He describes himself as the devil. God, however, describes Mephistopheles as, in English, a rogue, a spirit of negation, ein Schalk in German. So he's a helper devil. He's not demonic. Goethe has a different understanding of the word demon and demonic than what we usually mean by the word. Is closer to the Greek understanding of daimon. And Mephistopheles at the same time could be Hermes. So we'll try and find out. I found a paper on it, which I will share with those of you who sign up. So let me just point out again that we begin next week on Sunday at 6:30 p.m. UK time. This, if you click on the link to enroll, this is where it takes you. And then you can choose from, so you see all the seminar dates here. That's the final one is on the 8th of June, which is also, of course, a Sunday. Of course, the Gretchen tragedy, which is mentioned here, the Gretchen Frage, which is a term that you may know. Now say, what is your stance on religion? She asks him. Well, we shall find out. So, if you have time for, I'd say, at least 4 of the seminars to join in with the group, we've got about 20 people in the group already, then this is for you. There is a coupon code, which is wager. You could, I'll just do this. So, if you use that, it takes off £50, 50 quid off the philosophical fellowship tier, which is this one here. If you really can't make it to at least 4, let's just take the self-study tier, which is this one here. Or if you'd like to be initiated into the dark arts of magic, then you choose this one here. I think there's one left or so, I don't know. There are also payment plans. Okay, now enough of this. If you have questions, by the way, on Faust or on the course more generally speaking, let me know. What we're going to do this time is at the final seminar, as always, there will be a symposium where you can present your own work, be that a poet or an essay or a more academic paper. That's all fine. And you can send me a draft or what you've written by week 8. And I'll get your essay back to you then within a day. So you'll have enough time. I'll give you some comments on what to improve on me, what to look out for. They're not marked because it's not a university. There's no point in marking this, and there's no need for this either. Instead, it's about trying to get you to say what you'd like to say in a coherent manner. And so there will be enough opportunity to write on something. And it could also be very free. So you could actually write a poem inspired by Goethe's Faust. And we should then have, as always, a very good symposium in the final week. So I think there will be in total, I'm not very good with numbers, but I think in total there will be 7 lectures, 8 seminars, but in total 9 seminars, of course, because you are, I think it's 8 lectures. Yeah, I always make a mistake with the numbers, but that's just too many books, not enough numbers for me. So what we're going to try and understand, though, is why, for example, one question that that we have to address is why does Faust at all, if he is indeed post-Christian, why does he at all make a pact with what is quite obviously a Christian devil? Now, another question we should ask is why does Goethe at all turn to Faust in the first place? Why is Faust, which is the life project of Goethe, he spends decades of his life finishing it, completing it. He also wrote, well, I'll make reference to it sometimes, the Urfaust, so the primordial Faust. He took, so that's the first play that he wrote, so you could say it's his primordial, his first Faust. But it could also be that what he intended to write with the Faust was indeed not a new Faust, which would have been normal, let's say, to write a new Faust or a new kind of play for something that's already known. Marlowe's Faust was the most normal, but Faust also was just a used at puppet theaters, So Faust was a popular figure and almost laughable also. He seems to see something in Faust that's serious and profound. And but of course Faust also existed, even though, so Faust, just even without Goethe, Faust is a modern myth, maybe even the only modern myth that we have, really, if you can think of another one. And Dr. Faustus, who's German, apparently was in the business of projecting imagery in a very primitive manner. But if you think about the time when this would have been, this would have entirely confused and bewitched people. So in the 16th century, sometimes in the early 16th century, so he used a very primitive, to our eyes, primitive technique, but to project images of ancient Greek monstrosities and other fantastic beasts, and in that way bewildered his audience, not only children. So, and also people did think that that's the real Dr. Faustus, was actually capable of magic. And here's another question we should ponder at the seminars, which I sincerely hope that you will join us for, and I cordially invite you to join us. Don't forget to sign up if you've just joined us now. The link to do so is here. If you have questions, let me know. Now, another question we have to ponder is, why does Faust, Goethe's Faust, that is, turn to magic? To Nostradamus explicitly, for example, to a book by Nostradamus. Why does the earth spirit emerge? Which, again, could be a reference to the Kabbalah, but maybe also to German folk tales. But also he himself to conjure spirits. Why does he do this? I have a hunch why Goethe introduces this. I believe that Goethe is trying perhaps to show us that modernity isn't all that rational it claims to be. And if you know anything about Newton and let's just say his influence, then you might also agree with Goethe. Yeah. So let me know if you have any questions. Here's another. So just to speak about the three poles, the prelude on the theater is striking. The director says something that we should keep in mind, which is you have to use techniques of the masses to sway the masses. Because the poet, and of course to some degree, Goethe is all three of these characters here in the beginning. Goethe was a theater director. He was a poet, playwright. He was not maybe an actor or a comic actor, but he was definitely also a spirit who was able to negate. So Goethe sees that you need at once a certain sobriety in anything you do in the modern age, and especially in the burgeoning age of the machine. And that an all too lofty poetry no longer really has a place. But that at the same time is, of course, also the tragedy of Faust. Goethe himself at some point said to Hölderlin, he said to Hölderlin, which deeply hurt Hölderlin, that he should avoid writing on the ether and reminisce about the gods who have fled the world, and rather try to describe a mundane situation of the everyday, and at the same time show what's significant, poetically significant also. And perhaps also, I wouldn't want to use the word transcendent, but how this perhaps, at least let's say, points beyond itself. So Goethe, I think, and especially when you look at the his Wilhelm Meister, an extremely fragmentary work, which is also very sober, especially if you're more poetically inclined. The question is really, what is the role of poetry going forward? And that's another question that we will address here in the course. So let me just go over a few things again. Here's a question already. How do Faust and Nietzsche's Zarathustra compare? Well, I don't know. How do apples and bees compare? And I said bees, yes, not pears. I don't know if they do, to be honest. I think Zarathustra is a different attempt to understand what's going on than Goethe's Faust. It's one that is vastly less sober. Nietzsche's Zarathustra. I mean, not the. So again, Zarathustra is not a character. It's not a play. But the approach to what is by Nietzsche is, at this moment of writing, less sober than Goethe's is throughout his entire life. Which is why Goethe was able to write the Werther, the Werther. Because he was able to capture what is and then give it poetic significance. But what Nietzsche tried to do is to dream himself away and to make prophecy. So Goethe describes where the Occidental man stands. That's what Faust is. He doesn't try to write any sort of pseudo religion. So we begin next week, Sunday, April the 13th, and we complete our journey together. Here, by the way, here you have the earth spirit. And this here is a quote, strikingly, from none other than the Lord himself. Men must err as long as they still strive. So, we begin next week Sunday, 6:30 p.m. UK time. That's 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're going to spend 9 weeks together. And at the final seminar, you get to present your own talk or poem or essay or short story or whatever you will have written. And I will, of course, go over your writing. So if you send me your work by week 8, I will go over your whatever you send me, and I will provide you with commentaries. I will try and think along with what you are working on. I won't give you feedback. It's not cybernetics here. There won't be a feedback loop. So this here is the Philosophical Fellowship if you want to be in the live lectures and seminars. And if you use this, what is it? Oh, God. There's someone, it's always funny how there are people like this thing here where you wonder why, why waste your own time on this if all you do is as advancement increase in quantum technologies, we will be able to decode existence of such spirits. What even are you? You're some random freak who types into a computer and you think that you will control any of this? No. The internet is full of weird people, honestly. So if you want to do private tutorials with me, then choose The Apprentice here. And we get to meet 4 times in private. Now also, Marine. Hello, Marin, I suppose. Look forward to your philosophical reach and depth to Goethe's Faust. Dr. Faust, yes, so thank you very much. We do want to we do want to see what's philosophically going on, theologically, but also, of course, poetically, etc. We do want to understand why this is such a significant play, and I will try and argue that really what happens is that this is he's not looking back on the Faustian age as it ends. So he's not Spengler. I think Spengler takes it a bit too far. But what this work does is, as any real work, is it's birthing its own people in the future. That's what it wants to give birth to. And I will also quote Heidegger in the beginning, right in the beginning, Heidegger's Origin of the Artwork, where Heidegger says that a tragedy is not a performance. A tragedy is not an act. In real tragedy, in a real tragedy, what really gets to be, what really occurs, what really takes place is the battle between the old and the new gods. That's what happens in a tragedy. Yeah. So there are going to be many references to philosophers where it makes sense, of course. And yeah, so another thing that we should mention is, the word, the term Faustian gets thrown around a lot. Now, if you want to be Faustian, it's not just enough to suggest that we fly to the Mars so that you can pump the stock price of your failing car company. That's not enough. Um, what you have to do before is you have to study everything before. Again, how does the Faust begin? I've studied now to my regret philosophy, law, medicine, and what is worst, theology. Yet here I am, a wretched fool, and still no wiser than before. So, why does he say that it's the worst thing to study theology? I mean, this is not some pseudo-Socratic, or should I say Socratic pseudo-humility, this fake humility from Socrates. Oh, I ironically know that I know nothing. Ha, I know more than you. That kind of nonsense is not what he means. He is suffering from this. Socrates didn't suffer. He is suffering. Faust is suffering from from the knowledge that he's gained. Maybe not the insight into the the internal workings yet fully. But why is it worse to have studied theology? What do you think? Why is that? What happens when you study the Bible as a good Christian, or let's say as a good Catholic? What happens when you read the Old Testament? Huh? What do you think? Can you answer that for yourself? What might happen? Because the world in which Faust is, even though he seems more perhaps himself like a Protestant, is deeply Catholic. Gretchen comes from a deeply Catholic world. What's so bad about reading the Bible? What do we find in the Bible? Especially when you read it in the original. Sometimes the Greek or the Hebrew, etc. All of a sudden, Elohim becomes Yahweh. That's strange. Rarely discussed. Maybe the extreme violence. Maybe that very weird story about Abraham. Go and kill your son. And other weird stories. Maybe that's what he has in mind here. Yeah? Maybe. Just maybe. Because also, the Greeks were not modern. So the Greeks didn't really study like us. To sit there on your own and read on your own until you want to kill yourself as Faust, because of all that you know, and that you cannot really teach that because it's too terrifying. That's modern. That's what modern Western man goes through. That intense abstraction. The death wish is already there in early metaphysics. Yeah, as Socrates explicitly says, we can only be in scolaire and leisure when we're dead, which then Aristotle has to try and revert this complete access, Socratic access, or Platonic access of metaphysics. So that leisure is actually still possible, or is the foundation of the polis, rather than only possible for the dead, for the soul liberated from the body. What does that remind you of? Okay. Are the gods like two teams, Olympians and Titans, trading domination between each other, where the Titans replaced? Sorry, I was reading this to myself. Are the gods like two teams, the Olympians and Titans, trading domination between each other, or were the Titans replaced by the Olympians, replaced by Christ? replaced by a new iteration. Yeah, all of it. So you have I mean, I wouldn't say two teams, but but yeah, so you that's exactly it. The Olympians took out the Titans. The Olympians bring order. The Titanic rule is more chaotic, as Jünger says. And the Olympian gods, be that of Athens or of Rome, are of course then replaced by Christ, and the Christ figure takes on many of the attributes of the Roman gods and even of the Roman emperor. Yeah. So the sun attribute, or that Christ is of divine descendants, that he is the savior. So what now occurs is, of course, as Faust wrestles with Christianity, the question is, what are the new gods, or who are the new gods? There might be old gods, who knows? And Goethe did try to retrieve a sense of the ancients, at least in a manner that speaks to us. But for example, unlike Richard Wagner, Goethe never returns to Christianity himself. And he is utterly not anti-Christian, but unchristian from the beginning. He once says to Herder that he cannot fathom why this beautiful, beautiful earth, this world, should ever end. I mean, let's not forget, the book of love ends with hellfire raining down on the earth. The worst thing was to study theology. So, that was a good question. Thank you, WZ. Okay, let me know if you have more questions. I'll be here a couple more minutes. Yes, I agree. It is fascinating. And we are going to make this as fascinating as possible. This is not going to be a dry, boring reading. Oh, this is blah blah blah. This way. No. There's something at stake here. Goethe wrote this for his entire life, and you can only do this. You can only be that tenacious if you know that what you're writing has significance way beyond yourself. Way beyond yourself. So when you join us next week, all of you listening, then we step right into it. So the first lecture and seminar will be discussing the three pauses that lead into the entirety of the play. And the second lecture and seminar will be on Night and on his Easter Sunday stroll, Faust's Easter Sunday stroll, which actually will be reading on Easter Sunday. So there are let me just go over these tiers again. If you don't have time for at least, I'd say, 4 live seminars, and take the self-study tier, also make sure to use this coupon code here at the checkout, okay? So if you have time for at least 4, then join the Philosophical Fellowship live lectures and seminars. This is wrong. I made a mistake. It's 8 live lectures and 9 group seminars. I'll change it afterwards. Or if you want to take additional private tutorials with me, be my apprentice of sorts, then take this here. And as you might know, we're now in year 5. We're only just beginning, but I've really been working towards teaching Goethe's Faust ever since I started this thing. It's the most important text, I think, that you can read in the canon of the Occident of the past 250 years. There's nothing else like it. And so here, there's also a payment plan for the private tutorials or for the philosophical fellowship. And depending on which country you are, this might pop up, clear pay. So interest-free payments, you can sign up. That's an external, I don't know what this is. Some countries will offer this. I don't know where you are. All of these um, honorariums, all of these tuition fees, by the way, are inclusive of sales tax wherever you are. Yeah. So if you need, because maybe you're in an academy or a university, if you need an invoice later, then you have to email us and we can send you one. Okay, let's see. So is Yahweh a Titanic god? Well, no, he's not Titanic. Just different region. But so you have to be a Titan to be a Titanic deity. But yeah. So Johann Wolfgang von Goethe asks me, well, you should know this. If you're Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, how does Goethe's Faust influence Nietzsche's philosophy? I would Nietzsche's philosophy. I would say this. So let me maybe read something to you. To Goethe, Nietzsche and the Gay Science. The indestructible is but your invention. Guard the ineluctable poetic pretension. World wheel while rolling on. Skims aim on aim. Fate, says the sullen one. Fools call it a game. World's game, the ruling force, blends false and true. The eternally fooling force blends us in two. Now, Nietzsche sees himself as in touch with Goethe, and of course also he sees himself on basically the same level as he's wanted to do. Now as you might know, just looking for the quote here, alles Vergängliche ist nur ein Gleichnis. That's how the second Faust ends, by the mystical chorus. So everything ephemeral is just an analogy, and Nietzsche changes this to a certain degree, where he reverts let me try and find the precise quote in English so that it makes sense to you. If there are more questions, please let me know. So Nietzsche changes this to say that everything, alles, in German it's alles Unvergängliche, das ist nur ein Gleichnis und die Dichter lügen zu viel. So this is what I was looking for. Everything impermanent is just an analogy, and the poets lie too much. So this is, the poets lie too much is also a reference to Aristotle, but or even to Plato, of course. So he reverses this, yeah. Everything that's permanent, that's just an analogy. Where Goethe said, alles Unvergängliche, alles Vergängliche ist nur ein Gleichnis. Now you can see that Nietzsche basically tries to do Goethe one better, almost, you could say, and does not think, because this is a direct reference to Goethe's Faust, and he adds it, and the poets lie too much. So he does not seem to have thought that the Faust teaches us what Nietzsche would like to have, perhaps, Goethe have taught in the Faust. I'm not sure I understand that question entirely. Does he change it so that only becoming and not being is affirmed? What do you mean by it? Do you mean Faust? And who's he? Nietzsche? I mean, Goethe is the poet philosopher of becoming. Yeah, as you should know, because you're Goethe. In fact, everything static, sclerotic, is that which has become, das Gewordene, which is also necessary. But God and so human reason also are concerned with what is in becoming. That's the concern. Okay. No, that's okay. Don't worry. Yeah. So Goethe is a thinker poet of des Werdens, to use the German, of what is becoming, of the becoming, of corruption and generation, Genesis greift Torah, and there are anhaltende Gedanken, or what's the, not anhaltend, that's not accurate. There are, just looking for it, dauernde Gedanken. So lasting thoughts that keep together the cosmos, but they are, so it's thought plays a role, but reason, when it arrives at its highest, it's continuously then actually just articulating becoming. That's what Goethe is after. And Nietzsche, let's not forget, Nietzsche is not the philosopher of becoming. Hegel is the philosopher of becoming, and Goethe is the poet of becoming. Nietzsche thinks that he is the first one who addresses becoming, but he addresses das reine Werden, etc., the pure becoming. Hegel shows 50, 60 years before Nietzsche that pure becoming is impossible. Becoming needs to become something. It's a process that continuously forgets itself, determines itself further, etc. And there is a striking stasis to the eternal recurrence of the same, which Nietzsche tries to make sense of for his entire life, and ends up in not absurd, but actually old ideas like atomism, etc., to try and make sense of it. He never really does. I mean, Heidegger then tries to make sense of why Nietzsche, not what he meant by, to some degree, what he meant by, but why he actually had to turn to the eternal recurrence of the same at the quote unquote end of metaphysics. But that's for another time to discuss. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. You are again cordially invited to join us next week. As I mentioned, we've got 20 people already enrolled in the seminars. So if you don't have time for the seminars, because I saw someone say they don't have time for it, if you don't have time for the seminars, just join the self-study tier and listen to this at your own leisure. You get what the marketing people would call lifetime access to all digital recordings. So that's video and audio, and also the handout. And if you do have time for at least 4, then do join, 4 seminars, then do join the Philosophical Fellowship. The link to enroll is in the description of this video, by the way. If you want to take additional private tutorials with me, then take this one here, the Apprentice, the highest tier. Of course, it's the highest. There's a payment plan for that one as well. And there's also a payment plan for the Philosophical Fellowship, which is this one here, which means live seminars and lectures. Okay, so one last question. Mr. Wilkinson asks, please ignore the related. How would Spengler's thinking also relate? Well, there's no Spengler without Goethe's Faust. So Spengler is a Goethean. Yeah. The Faustian soul is Goethe's Faust and none other. The entire project of the decline of the Occident is Goethean through and through. Goethe's metamorphosis, his understanding of organic life, it's shot through with Goethe. So if you have an interest in Spengler, Mr. Wilkinson, then Goethe's Faust for you is indispensable. You need to have read at least Faust Part 1, which is what we're going to do here. So I'll just say this again. If you have an interest in Spengler's philosophy, even if you haven't read Spengler, but if you have some notion of what the Faustian soul is, then you must read Goethe's Faust. Marlowe's Faust has got nothing to do with Spengler's idea of the Faustian soul. So, James Wilkinson, I hope you can join us as well next week. If you head over to the enrollment page now, which is here in the chat, but is also in the description of this video, it takes you to this wonderful website here, which is Teachable, a platform that takes care of everything. They host everything for us. So you have an account with them and you sign up through them. And so everything will be stored on there forevermore. So you can always come back to these recordings. This is the idea. You read the text along for these 8-9 weeks, and in a year from now, maybe you just go back to some of the recordings, compare your notes from that time, you read the text again, you go over the recordings, etc. So you have indefinite access once you sign up, just once you sign up once. Well, in any event, thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to meeting you next week, Sunday, the 13th of April at 6:30 p.m. UK time, 1:30 p.m. EST. James Wilkinson says, thank you, looks very interesting. We'll take a look. Well, thank you very much for listening and for your question. So I do hope that you can join us. I'd be ever so delighted if you could. If you know anyone who's interested in modern poetry, Enlightenment philosophy, and of course this is a post-Enlightenment and also to some degree an anti-Enlightenment work, because let's not forget Mephistopheles says to God that reason, human beings abuse reason for what? For war and terror and torture and all the worst things. So basing an entire society only on reason, oh, what's that going to lead us to? The French Revolution, perhaps? The wonderful days in Paris? So, the guillotine. In any event, There's a lot to discuss. So if you know anyone who's interested in Faust, in Goethe, or let's just say in modernity, what it means to be us, what it means to be human in our time, then let them know. Maybe send them a link to this live stream or to the enrollment page. And again, I look forward to meeting you next week when you've signed up. Thank you.